Chapter 11, the Legislative Research Commission. The Legislative Research Commission is a statutory agency of Kentucky government, created in and maintained since 1948 as the service arm of the General Assembly. Its membership is bipartisan, being composed of the President and President pro tempore of the Senate, the Speaker and Speaker pro tempore of the House of Representatives, and for each house the majority and minority floor leaders, caucus chairs, and whips. A total of 16 members, all ex officio. The President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House serve as co-chairs. The Commission holds regular monthly meetings and may meet on call of the co-chairs or on the written request of any 3 members. It performs various functions and services for the General Assembly assigned to it by statute, by the rules of each House, and by its own motion or policy. Research. The Commission is directed by law to make investigations into legislation, governmental agencies and institutions, and matters of public policy that will aid the General Assembly in performing its duties in the most efficient and economical manner. It may also undertake research on its own initiative. In accordance with this mandate, the Commission is authorized access to the records of all state agencies and institutions, and any private agency and institution that has received public funds, with subpoena power if necessary. During an interim, the staff may conduct various major research assignments, in addition to providing spot research as requested by interim and standing committees of the General Assembly, individual legislators, other state agencies, and the public.
Peggy King Legislative Reference Library. The Commission maintains the Peggy King Legislative Reference Library in the basement of the Capitol Annex. The library serves as a repository of documents and publications relating to the General Assembly and interim committee activity. In addition, there is a collection of general reference books and public affairs publications. The library has computer online searching capability and an active interlibrary loan program. LRC library holdings and services are available to legislators and support the research and ongoing committee work of LRC staff. Statute revision. The Legislative Research Commission is responsible for executing plans and methods for codifying and correcting the Kentucky Revised Statutes. Bill drafting and pre-filing. The Legislative Research Commission affords to any member of the General Assembly or any committee of either House the information and assistance necessary in preparing bills, resolutions, amendments, and revisions and substitutes proposed to be introduced in the General Assembly. Legislators may make a request through the Legislative Research Commission Director for Committee and Staff Coordination's Office for assistance in bill drafting at any time. A staff person is assigned to work on a particular draft and will confer with the sponsor to ensure the draft accomplishes what the sponsor intends. All bill draft requests are confidential, and staff will work with parties other than the sponsor only at the specific direction of the sponsor. Members are encouraged to work closely with LRC staff to develop their legislation. Members are authorized to pre-file bills and resolutions for an ensuing session with the Legislative Research Commission. The Commission receives these, refers them to the appropriate interim joint committee, posts online, and arranges for immediate printing and distribution to members and the public. These pre-filed bills are then introduced on the first legislative day of the next regular session.
Administrative regulations. Each state administrative agency exercising its authority to promulgate or amend administrative regulations must submit to the Legislative Research Commission the original and 5 copies of each proposed regulation. Administrative regulations must comply with drafting standards, deadlines, notice, and other requirements imposed by KRS Chapter 13A. After review by the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee, an administrative regulation shall be referred to an appropriate interim joint or standing committee for a second review. This second legislative committee has 30 days in which to review the regulation. Emergency regulations become effective upon filing with the LRC and expire 180 days after the date of filing or when the same matter filed as an ordinary administrative regulation is adopted, whichever comes first. If an administrative regulation is found deficient by either the Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee or an interim joint committee, the promulgating agency may attempt to amend the regulation to correct the deficiency. If the regulation continues to be deficient, legislation declaring the regulation null, void, and unenforceable may be enacted at a subsequent session of the General Assembly. Each month, LRC compiles, prints, and distributes on a subscription basis the administrative regulations, filed by noon on the 15th of the previous month, in the Administrative Register of Kentucky. Annually, LRC compiles, prints, and distributes the Kentucky Administrative Regulations Service, which constitutes the official state publication of administrative regulations and contains all administrative regulations filed with the Commission.
Budget review. The Commission has assumed its budget review function as a method of providing the Committee on Appropriations and Revenue and the Budget Review Subcommittee's adequate knowledge of budget matters pertaining to all agencies of state government. Each branch is required by law to publish an annual financial and program status report detailing activities, appropriations, allotments, expenditures, receipts, transfers, encumbrances, and available balances of each budget unit of the branch, and an explanation of the programs and services provided by the branch. The Commission has the statutory duty to prescribe uniform instructions and forms to be used by all agencies in developing their budget estimates and requests. Additionally, the Commission receives copies of agency budget requests as they are submitted to designated officials in each branch prior to each legislative session. This information enables the budget review staff to prepare for the introduction of the branch biennial budgets and to give them detailed and enlightened study following their receipt by the General Assembly. Capital Planning Advisory Board. The Capital Planning Advisory Board of the General Assembly is charged with the responsibility of developing in each biennium a comprehensive statewide 6-year capital improvements plan. All state agencies and universities' capital budget needs, including construction, maintenance, and renovation projects, major items of equipment, and real property leases, are identified in biennial capital planning submissions to the Board. The Board reviews these submissions, conducts hearings to receive input from agency and university representatives and the public, and considers the cross-cutting capital issues of the Commonwealth, such as space needs and a statewide communications network. The Board then develops its statewide capital improvements plan for submission to the 3 branch heads, as statutorily required, by November 1st of odd-numbered years. The Board's statewide capital improvements plan includes recommendations of projects to be undertaken or continued in the 6-year planning period, as well as recommendations as to priority and means of funding. The Board was created by the 1990 General Assembly and is composed of 16 members appointed by the heads of the 3 branches of state government. The Board is statutorily defined as an entity of the General Assembly, and the staff and administrative costs of the Board are financed by the Legislative Research Commission.
Capital Projects and Bond Oversight. The Capital Projects and Bond Oversight Committee, a permanent subcommittee of the Legislative Research Commission, is charged with overseeing the expenditure of funds budgeted for capital projects. The allotment of funds from the Capital Construction and Equipment Purchase Contingency Account and the Emergency Repair, Maintenance, and Replacement Account. The state's acquisition of capital assets, including the lease of real property. And the issuance of bonds or notes by the Commonwealth and the oversight of related individual projects. After capital projects are authorized by the General Assembly, the committee reviews those projects for which modifications are necessitated by circumstances unforeseen at the time the projects were authorized. The committee reviews allotments from the emergency account to finance the cost of equipment purchases and capital construction projects that are needed to maintain government operations and that resulted from disasters, unanticipated deterioration, mechanical or electrical breakdown, or structural defects. Allotments from the contingency account to fund cost overruns for approved projects, feasibility studies, and audits of the capital projects program must be approved by the committee prior to the allotment of the funds. The Finance and Administration Cabinet is required to report to the committee all new state real property leases with an annual cost of $200,000 or more. Modifications in any amount to existing leases must also be reported to the committee. Every state agency authorized to issue bonds, except the Turnpike Authority of Kentucky, and every local school district must, prior to the issuance of any bonds, submit information about the proposed bond issue to the committee for its review and a recommendation. The committee also reviews development projects funded with proceeds of state bond issues. Such development projects include local drinking water and wastewater infrastructure projects, and economic development bond-funded projects approved for state loans or grants that have line item authorization or are approved for funding from the authorized development bond pool.
Child Welfare Oversight and Advisory Committee. The Child Welfare Oversight and Advisory Committee reviews, analyzes, and provides oversight on child welfare issues, including foster care, adoption, and child abuse, neglect, and dependency. Commission on Race and Access to Opportunity. The Commission was established in 2021 to study and research issues where disparities may exist across the sectors of education equity, child welfare, health, economic opportunity, juvenile justice, criminal justice, and any other sectors that are deemed relevant in an effort to identify areas of improvement in providing services and opportunities for minority communities. Consensus Forecasting Group. The Consensus Forecasting Group, or CFG, was established to enable the executive and legislative branches of government to work cooperatively in preparing consensus revenue estimates to be used as the official basis for budgeting purposes. Members of the CFG are selected jointly by the State Budget Director and the Legislative Research Commission. Historically, the CFG has chosen the Secretary of the Finance and Administration Cabinet to serve as chair. LRC personnel staff the CFG to review and independently assess the economic and revenue data and assumptions provided by the Governor's Office for Economic Analysis. Neither LRC staff nor staff of the Governor's Office for Economic Analysis acts as a single source of technical information for the members of the CFG. Members of the CFG are ultimately responsible for making the final determinations on the incorporation of technical information into the official revenue estimates used for budget preparation.
Education Accountability. Under the direction of the Legislative Research Commission, the Office of Education Accountability, or OEA, was established by the 1990 General Assembly's passage of the Kentucky Education Reform Act. OEA is advised and monitored by the Education Assessment and Accountability Review Subcommittee, or EAARS. As authorized by statute, OEA reviews the state's system of school finance, verifies the accuracy of school district and state performance, and investigates unresolved allegations of wrongdoing at the state, regional, and district level. In addition, staff perform studies and analyze available data on the efficiency of the system of schools to determine whether progress is being made toward attaining the goal of providing students with the 7 capacities required by statute. The Office of Education Accountability reports periodically to EAARS and reports annually to the Governor, the Legislative Research Commission, and the Kentucky Board of Education upon approval of the annual report. This reporting includes recommendations for improvement. The Office of Education Accountability has access to all public records and information on testimony given under oath and otherwise confidential records, meetings, and hearings regarding local school district personnel matters. OEA shall not disclose any information contained in or derived from these records that would permit the discovery of the identification of any individual who is the focus or subject of a personnel matter. Any state agency is to notify OEA when it receives a complaint or information that may identify a violation of the Kentucky Education Reform Act. OEA maintains a toll-free hotline service to receive concerns and complaints from citizens, parents, school district employees, and others. This office is charged with investigating allegations of waste, mismanagement, and illegal activity that have not been adequately addressed or explained by a local district. Concerns and complaints reported to this office regularly involve school-based decision-making, special education, the state testing and accountability program, nepotism, governance issues, conflict of interest of board members, inadequate educational programs, and various problems involving local district policies. Issues that are not within the jurisdiction of the OEA are referred back to the local school district or the appropriate state, federal, or investigative agency.
Education Assessment and Accountability Review Subcommittee. The Education Assessment and Accountability Review Subcommittee is empowered to review administrative regulations and advise the Kentucky Board of Education concerning the implementation of the state system of assessment and accountability. The subcommittee also advises and monitors the Office of Education and Accountability. Government Contract Review. State agencies and state universities proposing to negotiate personal service contracts are required to transmit copies of the contracts and supporting documentation to the Government Contract Review Committee of the Legislative Research Commission. The committee reviews the contracts and may lodge any objection it has with the negotiating agency or university. The agency or university may comply with the objection or may propose no such complying action. If the agency or university chooses not to comply, the particular contract is disapproved and sent to the Secretary of the Finance and Administration Cabinet or, where applicable, the President of the University. The Cabinet Secretary or University President may override the committee's objection and allow the contract to remain in effect, or uphold the committee's position and cancel the contract. Legislative Oversight and Investigations. The Legislative Oversight and Investigations Committee is a statutory committee of the General Assembly with staff and support services provided by the Legislative Research Commission. The committee serves as the main investigative committee in the General Assembly. It has the authority to investigate the subjects within the committee's legislative jurisdiction and within the jurisdiction of other standing or statutory committees of the General Assembly. The committee has the discretionary power to review the operations of state agencies and programs, to determine whether funds are being spent for the purposes for which they were appropriated, to evaluate the efficiency of program operations, and to evaluate the impact of state government reorganizations.
Medicaid Oversight. The Medicaid Oversight and Advisory Committee is directed to meet at least 4 times annually to monitor the implementation of Medicaid within the Commonwealth, including access to services, utilization of services, quality of services, and cost containment. Public Pension Oversight Board. The 13-member Public Pension Oversight Board assists the General Assembly with its review, analysis, and oversight of the administration, benefits, investments, funding, laws and administrative regulations, and legislation pertaining to the Kentucky retirement systems. Kentucky Retirement Systems encompasses the Kentucky Employees Retirement System, the County Employees Retirement System, and the State Police Retirement System. Members include legislators, executive branch officials, and individuals with specific retirement or investment experience. Tobacco Settlement Oversight. The Tobacco Settlement Agreement Fund Oversight Committee is required to review each project being submitted to the Agricultural Development Board for funding from the Tobacco Settlement Fund, to provide findings and determinations to the Legislative Research Commission, and to issue an annual report.
Intergovernmental Cooperation. The Legislative Research Commission is directed to encourage and arrange conferences with officials of other states and of other units of government, carry forward the participation of Kentucky as a member of the Council of State Governments and the National Conference of State Legislatures, and formulate proposals for cooperation with other states. The Commission functions as Kentucky's Commission on Interstate Cooperation, and designates persons to represent the Commonwealth at the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws. The Commission, as the Kentucky Commission on Interstate Cooperation, is required to encourage and assist legislative, executive, and judicial officials and employees of the Commonwealth to develop and maintain personal contact with departments, agencies, officials, and employees of other states, the federal government, and local units of government. Pursuant to these requirements, the Commission designates various legislative members to interstate cooperative bodies and represents Kentucky on the Committee on Suggested State Legislation of the Council of State Governments. Housekeeping and records maintenance for the General Assembly. After each session, the Commission assumes custody of all furniture, equipment, records, materials, supplies, and printed copies of bills in possession of the Senate and the House. The Commission may, when the General Assembly is not in session, authorize the expenditure of funds appropriated to the General Assembly to purchase, repair, or maintain furniture, equipment, materials, and supplies, and to contract for services needed by the General Assembly. In addition, when the General Assembly is not in session, the Commission has jurisdiction over the use of its chambers and over the allocation of all rooms it uses while in session. In this regard, the Commission maintains a property inventory, pay, and retirement records for members of the General Assembly and arranges and controls the expenditure of General Assembly funds during the interim. A further proviso on General Assembly records maintenance is the directive that the Commission obtain at the close of each session all the non-current records of the General Assembly and each committee and transfer them to the State Archives and Records Center for preservation.
Provision of statutes to the General Assembly. By resolution, the 1972 General Assembly directed the Commission to furnish each member of the General Assembly upon request by the member a set of the Kentucky Revised Statutes if the member does not own or have reasonable access to the statutes, for his or her use while in office. The resolution directs return of the statutes when the member vacates his or her seat in the General Assembly.